From a gigantic hell-like IKEA to a cowbell that can't be rung, I got 5 cursed SCP items that need to get locked up forever. Number 5 on this list is SCP-513. SCP-513 is a very rusty cowbell that cannot be cleaned off no matter how hard somebody tries. This cowbell is extremely dangerous and must be locked up, and especially never rung. If this bell is rung, then all those within a 120-foot radius of this ring, they're in for some trouble. The second that you hear this ring, you will become cursed. You may not be aware that you're cursed at first because the early symptoms are simply anxiety and the feeling that someone's watching you, but that stage of the curse goes by fast because within an hour you're gonna start to catch glimpses of SCP-513-1. SCP-513-1 is a very tall and slender humanoid figure that's limbs are far too long for its body. It's kind of similar to Slenderman, but the length of its limbs make it a little bit more unsettling to look at. An hour after this ring, this creature is going to begin appearing. You may see it as you pass by a mirror or as you turn a corner. If you ever make direct eye contact with it, then it's going to vanish just as quickly as it appeared. This curse is going to stay with someone forever, and no one else is going to be able to help you or even see what you're going through. This causes those who are cursed to experience severe sleep deprivation and slowly lose their minds. Many victims will eventually take their own lives because they believe it's the only way out of this walking nightmare. Something that has this ability needs to get locked away forever. Ideally, it should even be destroyed, but considering we can't even get the rust off of it, I would assume it's probably impenetrable. If anyone with ill intentions got a hold of this bell and started ringing it in a crowded area like a city or a mall, then all hell would break loose. If it was up to me, then this thing is getting locked up in the deepest vault possible, and then we're throwing away the key. Number 4 on this list is SCP-572. SCP-572 is a sword. It's not the type of sword that you'd want to use though, because it honestly kind of sucks. The Foundation writes, the weapon is badly balanced for combat use, is made of substandard steel, and does not hold an effective combat edge. So really not the type of weapon that you'd want to take into a fight unless it was your last option. But it's that exact reason why its curse is so dangerous. The Foundation goes on to say, the weapon has the unusual psychotropic quality of convincing any person who holds it of its balance and cutting power, as well as conferring feelings of great strength and invincibility. Basically, if you hold this sword, you automatically start thinking that you're some type of sword god, when really you're just holding a long rusty butter knife. This overconfidence is said to lead people into performing very dangerous stunts with this sword. They'll try to cut a car in half as it's going full speed at them, try and slice a bullet in two as it's being shot at them, attempt to fight actual trained professionals with far more experience and way better weapons. As you can imagine, all of these things don't end very well for those who attempt them. Many people who end up with this sword either end up dying in some gruesome way from their own overconfidence, or at the very least get maimed horribly and barely survive. The worst part about this sword as well is that once you're holding onto it, you refuse to give it up. Kind of like the One Ring from Lord of the Rings, this sword is said to appeal to the holder's greed, and they just refuse to let it go. An item like this is simply too dangerous to be out in the world. It's just one big disaster waiting to happen. Lock it away and keep it there forever. Number 3 on this list is SCP-2307-1. SCP-23071 is definitely a weird one. It isn't as dangerous as some of the other entries on this list, but it definitely needs to be kept locked away if possible. The Foundation describes it as the remains of a long sword with a 56cm hilt and a partial blade approximately 40cm in length, estimated to be approximately 43% of its original size. Carbon dating has shown that the hilt and crossguard of the sword date to approximately the 4th century CE. However, the metal used in the blade dates to approximately 3.2 billion BCE. SCP-23071 is in a severe state of disrepair as a result of being submerged in water for at least 1,300 years. So once again guys, we're dealing with a sword that really isn't too much to look at all. But similarly to our last sword entry, something very strange happens when somebody touches the hilt of said sword. The Foundation writes, SCP-23071's primary anomaly manifests when a subject makes contact with the hilt of the sword. Following this, all records pertaining to the subject will gradually distort in a manner that reflects positively on the subject, giving wildly different accounts of their life over a period of time. It starts slow, but basically over the course of several years, everything that is known about you is going to change. Your birth certificate will be inaccurate, your bank statements will be wrong, your name is going to change. Every single thing that indicates who you are will have changed without you doing anything about it. When you die, your death certificate will be wrong as well. No one will have known who you were or what you did because your whole life story is going to be documented with a bunch of lies. Like I said, it's not the most dangerous on this list, but also something that we don't really need happening to people on the regular. Number 2 on this list is SCP-3008. SCP-3008 may just be the strangest SCP that I've ever come across. There are multiple things that go on with this SCP, but the Foundation's initial description of it is a large retail unit previously owned by and branded as IKEA, a popular furniture retail chain. They go on to write that the inside of the store is a space resembling the inside of an IKEA furniture store, extending far beyond the limits of what could physically be contained within the dimensions of the retail unit. Current measurements indicate an area of at least 10 kilometers squared with no visible external terminators detected in any direction. So this item is actually a massive IKEA store that from the outside looks like a normal IKEA. This SCP gets even weirder though. There are apparently people who are trapped inside this massive SCP who have actually been there long enough to have built settlements and a small society. And these people who are trapped inside this IKEA have to regularly defend themselves against these humanoid entities that resemble IKEA workers but have no facial features and become extremely violent at nighttime. I should also note that it's very difficult to leave the IKEA once you get trapped inside because the exits continually move around the store at unknown times. So if that's not the craziest SCP that you've ever heard of, then I actually don't know what is. But luckily for us, SCP-3008 is currently contained and it has to stay that way. We have no idea how many people are currently trapped inside this IKEA and how many have died in there. If this IKEA was ever not contained and it was just on the street, then one simple trip to go get a new bath curtain could completely change your life forever. Hopefully one day all of the people currently trapped in there can escape, but for now, we need to keep that thing locked up. Number 1 on this list is SCP-666. SCP-666 is a strange one because it's only very dangerous to some individuals. It's described by the Foundation as a medium-sized Tibetan yurt made of tied wooden branches and covered in yak leather. The interior ceiling is 2.44 meters high and the base of the yurt is 9.14 meters. The hut is circular in shape. The interior of the yurt has a dirt floor and appears to be as crude as the outside to the majority of observers. The branches that make up the yurt frame are wrapped in rabbit fur and tied with yak leather thongs. So basically we just have a standard yurt. For many people this yurt will cause no problems at all and one can stay in it as long as they like. However, if someone who has or has had a substance abuse problem goes into the yurt, then some very bad things will happen. SCP-6661 is an entity that is said to appear to those who've dealt with substance abuse problems. This entity will attempt to get that individual to give into their past vices and get them to once again take whatever substance they had a problem with. The person who's in the yurt also can't simply leave because the second they get in there, the whole environment changes to something else. If the person gives into this entity and does take said substance, then the entity gets very violent and often leads to that person's death. This whole thing is really scary and it's really wrong. It seems like this demon creature wants to incite chaos and cause harm to this select group of people. Currently, SCP-666 is contained and similar to the IKEA, it has to stay that way. Well, there you have it, guys. That is our list of the top 5 cursed SCP items that should be locked away forever. Please comment down below what you thought about this list and some other SCP items that need to get chained up for good. Thank you so much for watching. I've been your host, Nicholas Blaylog, and I'll catch you next time.